Wow. Good evening, everyone. If you could find your way to your seats, we're going to go ahead and get started. Great to see such a sea of faces out there for our event tonight. We welcome you. Whoops. Okay, try again. We welcome you to this evening's Anne Arundel Women Giving Together Women in Leadership Event 2025. I know, yay! My name is Kathleen Kriza, and I'm the chair of the Education Committee for the Giving Circle. And we are so excited to see so many faces, both live and live stream this evening. And we're excited to bring you a very special program tonight. And before I get started on that, I'd like to share some housekeeping things with you. If you see this QR code up behind the stage, and that will give you this evening's program. Now, to get to that, you have to go to the public Wi-Fi, which is SJC Public News. So if you go to SJC Public News, you have open Wi-Fi, scan the QR code, you'll get lengthy biographies on our speakers up here and information about the organization itself. So this event is being recorded, so if you'd like to share it with someone or watch it again yourselves, it will be on the givingtogether.org website, so you'll be able to access it there. I'd like to say some thank yous, first of all, to St. John College for hosting the event in this beautiful facility. So thank you, St. John's College. And to Lisa Osherman and the events committee for arranging the hospitality for this evening. Thank you so much. They've been here for hours. All those beautiful flowers. And the education committee that I get to have the pleasure of working with for all their support the whole journey. And then they're also been your wayfinders and your greeters tonight. So thank you to all of them. Yay. And we have an extra special thanks to our media sponsor for 2025, the Baltimore Banner. We appreciate your support. It's going to help us reach a wider audience, so thank you so much. And we'd like to welcome some officials who are here this evening. First of all, Major General Janine Burkhart. Yay! Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for being here tonight. Dylan Baylor, our new delegate. Is Dylan here? Dylan's on the list. And Julie Hummer from District 6. Are you here, Julie? There she is. Thank you, Julie. And Lisa Rodvian, also from District 6. Yeah. Thank you. Finally, if you're interested in joining us, again, please go to our website. It's an exciting way to be a woman in the Anne Arundel County to help and make a difference in your community. So we have a lot of fun. There's amazing women, and we do good things. So we hope that you'll come join us. So Audre Lorde, activist, scholar, and poet, says, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. Almost 20 years ago, 15 fearless women gathered together in Sharon Stewart's living room. Where are you, Sharon? Sharon Stewart's living room. Determined to create their vision for how to make a difference in their local community. They did some research and learned about a giving circle in Baltimore County. They were so impressed with the idea of collective philanthropy, and so they decided to create a giving circle in Anne Arundel County. Now, collective philanthropy, if you're not familiar with it, is when members, in our case, for our giving circle, donate a sum of money each year. Then that money is invested in the Community Foundation for Anne Arundel County and distributed each year in grants of up to $25,000 per women-run nonprofits that support women and families in Anne Arundel County. Yay! In our giving circle, we have also developed programs such as this educational event. We have 3 of these each year. 2 of them are on Zoom. And our Young Philanthropist program is a new program, and we also have an equity study group, and all of those groups work hard to keep us informed, vital, and inclusive. From that small beginning, we now have over 350 members. We have given almost $2 million in grants to 52 local nonprofits. And we are currently reviewing this year's grants, and in May we will give over $225,000, putting us over that $2 million mark. And what's really exciting is that we are just one of many. All around the country, there are women's giving circles. And in fact, the number of giving circles has tripled over the last 10 years. So when you think about this and think about across the country, what women are doing to make a difference in their communities, it's pretty phenomenal. So giving circles are organized by intelligent, passionate, committed women. We are clear on our vision and stand strong together with dynamic women-run nonprofits who support, again, women and families. We know that when we support women in need, we see the following: improved maternal and child health, enhanced educational opportunities for children, increased household income, stronger empowerment and decision-making, reduced stress and mental health challenges, positive role modeling for their children, and we're working to break that cycle of poverty. It's a big difference that we make in doing this work with women. So women in leadership events such as this are a reminder of the power we have when women and men unite around shared values. Thank you to the men who are here with us this evening as well. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That is our story. Tonight, we have the honor of learning from 2 trailblazing women leaders who are here to share their journeys and inspire us all to make a difference. And now, I would like to introduce to you this evening's facilitator, Margaret Davis. Margaret is also the president of Anne Arundel Women Giving Together, and I'm telling you, she has worked tirelessly to not only make this evening's program a success, but also to assure that our organization is evolving to meet our commitment to welcome and embrace all. You can read about her extensive background when you scan the QR code for the program, and we want to thank you, Margaret, for all you do for our organization and for facilitating tonight's conversation. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and let's thank Kathleen Kriza, who is the chairman of our education committee. We would not be here without you. She inspires all of us every day. And don't you just want to also get out your phones and fill out that online membership application right now? Because this is the place to be. And you can feel the electricity and the energy now in this auditorium, and then anytime we all get together, because I was just asked, so what is this group and who are these women? And I said, these are just among the most passionate, committed women you'll ever meet who want to make a difference both locally and tie into national and international movements. And speaking of which, as we all know, happy International Women's Day on March 8th, just this past Saturday. What an incredible experience. I did a quick digging because I thought, okay, so how long has this been around? I went, what? 1910? How about that? And Nora Demleitner, it was a German feminist who actually started bringing it internationally. So no surprise that Nora Demleitner has a little German feminism, I know, in her background too, and is right here in Arundel County with us at St. John's College. I love this organization, and you can see why when you hear Kathleen talk about its impact. We hope that you'll join us. It is an organization for all women, all backgrounds, and the common denominator, as I said, is that we care, we want to make a difference, and it's all volunteer. So all your money goes right to where it counts and where it's needed most. We also have this wonderful relationship with the Community Foundation of Anne Arundel County. You'll hear a little bit about that at the end. And we couldn't do what we do without them. And they make sure, I call them the vault. They make sure your money, your contributions are well taken care of so we can do the fun stuff and get the work done and get the money out the door to have impact in our community with women and families. So let's get to know each other for a moment. I have an idea. Raise your hand if you are currently, it's self-identification, don't be bashful, don't be humble, if you're currently a woman leader. We know these two are, so come on, ladies. Start the trend right here. There you go. Keep your hands up. No, come on, a little exercise is good. How about raise your hand if you have been a female woman leader? And how about those who aspire to be one? Keep your hands. Okay, we covered everybody except the guys, but that's okay. How about I'll add one more, and you support women leaders. There you go, everybody's hands right up there. So let's have a living room style conversation. You've just joined a 350-person living room right here. It's a nice big living room that St. John's College is providing. Let's have a living room conversation with these two incredible trailblazers. I've learned in my 38 years of being involved with the military that leaders, particularly women leaders, will cut you right off if you start introducing them with a full bio. Besides, the bios on these two ladies are so long that they don't want me to read them, and you don't want me to read them. So the good news is, go to that QR code. Hopefully you all heard Kathleen get on the wonderful public Wi-Fi here. You can start digging down into those rabbit holes on all sorts of fascinating aspects of their background and the contributions these women have made to our society. Because you're triple and quadruple taskers, we know you can do that. Go ahead, use your phones, because you're going to be listening and you won't want to miss any of this as well. Since everyone wants to get to know you both, would you take a couple minutes, let's see how long, I'm giving them 2 to 3, to give us a little bit of a narrative arc, précis, on your journey, not just your career, your journey to this moment in time in life and in our society, and maybe try to bring in along the way a particularly crossroads of an experience, of people that have really helped shape who you are and why you're doing what you're doing today. So may I start with President Demleitner, and then we'll move on to General Singh.
Thank you so much. I'm truly thrilled to be here tonight, and I want to thank you all for coming out. I'm thrilled that we're filling the auditorium here at St. John's College. Since you started by saying something about my German background, some of you will know this, but I grew up in Germany, German parents, and so I would not be here if my parents hadn't somehow, I think, foolhardily supported my idea of coming to college in the United States. I went to another small liberal arts college, which was perfect for me at the time, and then I went on to Yale Law School. And of course, you don't do any journey in life on your own. There are always people who are with you from the start, and then you pick up new friends, supporters, compatriots along the way. Critics, of course, as well. I started going into legal academia soon after law school, and really, I think, consider most of my career in legal academia. I became a dean really because it was a fortuitous opportunity. I had been the academic dean, and the dean at the time had quadruple bypass surgery and never came back. He's perfectly fine, I want to assure you. But he never came back to the office because his wife said, this job is clearly making you sick, so how about if you let someone else do the job? So that's how I got my first deanship. I was the first woman at Hofstra Law School. And I have to say, it really was my family that made this possible. And I have to call out my late mother, who helped bring up our children. And she said, I'm still in good enough health. I know the kids are little, but do it now before I get too old. So I followed that advice. I don't think I have to tell anybody who has a partner that the partner in life makes a huge difference. And since my husband is in the audience, I can call him out as being really an incredibly supportive spouse who's moved many a times for me and done a whole host of incredible things to support my career. And then after Hofstra, I became the law school dean at Washington and Lee in Virginia. And when this opportunity here opened up, I didn't look at it, but it was a female, actually college law school, a college classmate of mine who said, you need to look at this opportunity. Despite the fact that my otherwise supportive spouse said, how are you qualified to be a college president? Correctly so you need to keep your critics close. I applied for this position and was really thrilled to get it. So that brings me to being here tonight. Some of you heard that I am the first woman since 1696 appointed to serve as president of the college. And I have gotten, I think, nothing but really great support. I'm sure there was adjustment too inside and outside the college to a woman, but really it's been an incredibly supportive atmosphere here at St. John's. So let me leave it here.
Thank you, well done. I think she was within her time too. That's fabulous, thank you so much. General Singh, and I know that as a trailblazer, these are very humble women. I hope you'll also mention the first that you've also accomplished for our society, so please.
Yeah, so I'm a born and bred Marylander, so I've lived pretty much in Maryland almost my whole life, with the exception of a few years where I lived in Florida, and quickly moved back here because it was a little too hot. So when I think about just my overall journey, I didn't come through a traditional path. I think I had a rough kind of teenagehood, if you would say it that way, growing up here, having to quit school and leave what I love, because I absolutely love school. It was like my soulless place to be. And then, finally I went on to join the Maryland National Guard, and I know that sounds kind of crazy because I finished my career with the Maryland National Guard. And so joining the Maryland National Guard at the age of 17, thanks to a recruiter who I didn't even know was my recruiter. I finally went back and looked at who my recruiter was and realized it was someone that I had known almost my whole career, which is really crazy. But when you think about just getting the opportunity to be able to go into something that you never thought you would ever do, and then being able to look at, okay, here's what I dreamed for my life. I didn't think it was going to happen because of me having to come out of school and having been homeless at one point. I went on to get multiple degrees. I have a very interesting religious background. I mean, I grew up Methodist and Baptist, but I went to summer school in a Catholic church. My husband, who I am now married to, is Hindu. Yeah, you go on. My undergraduate degree is from a 7-day Adventist school, so I love religion. I just love it. I love people. I love everybody. And so when you just think about that whole mix and really continuing my education, it took me 10 years to get my undergraduate degree, and then I landed a job with a very large consulting company, Accenture. It was Anderson Consulting at the time, but it's Accenture now. And when I got the opportunity to be considered for the Adjutant General, it was a hard choice for me. So when I think about just making that choice, while there were a number of individuals mentoring me over the years, I think that it was a really hard choice because I loved where I was. I loved working in corporate America and working big jobs. And so I was running, I was actually the director of operations for Accenture's Health and Public Service North America operating unit. So you're looking at a $3.6 billion book of business at the time, right? So I was doing a lot of different things. But when I really looked at the impact that I could have when they were asking me to put in for the Adjutant General, I really didn't think I was going to get it. I actually thought it was going to be somebody else. And then when I got the call and said, they want to interview you, I'm like, really? So then you have to have the conversation with my husband, right? I got to go back to the partner and say, this could happen. What do you think? And the question was, am I going to leave my corporate job? And I'm not going to lie to you, it was, a significant pay cut. Not going to talk about how much, but it was significant.
Huge.
And so I had to look at, the bigger mark of, well, what's the impact? I've always focused on, what's the impact that I wanted to be able to have. And to me, that was a full circle moment. The National Guard took me off the streets. It's given me opportunity. It helped me to, get my education. It gave me my home. And so stepping into that role, I wasn't thinking about becoming the first female and the first African American in the role. I was thinking about what I could give back to an organization that gave me life. And that was really where I was focused. And so then when, it started looking like I, was going to be the selectee, and after I met Governor Hogan, I literally walked out of the interview and called my husband and I said, if I'm offered the job, I think I'm going to take it. How much can we cut? We need to start saving, we need to cut everything because we had just built a custom home. I hate to say it, we built a custom home. So, I was just like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? It was probably the highlight of my life, right? Because I got a chance to continue to work with amazing leaders, General Burkhead, she's followed behind me in every single role that I think I've had. And so being able to give back to the organization, but most importantly, to leave a mark on the organization and to just hope that there are going to be other leaders coming up that could run the organization. And yes, I did focus on women because it takes so long to create a general officer. And so if I'm not thinking and focusing way down the road, then there's no way I'm going to have them 10, 15 years down, down the path. And so when I think about just my overall accomplishment and finishing and culminating my military career, having served as the Adjutant General, which is where I started my overall career, I thought that was a pretty good note. And so yes, there is an armory named after me, and good thing, it's a state building, so I don't think it'll be unnamed after me. So I'd like to say, I think that's pretty good.
These are amazing stories, aren't they? What narrative arcs. I was planning to bring in a point that's already come up a little later in the conversation, so I'm just going to pause here and mention, let's name what's in the room right now. In addition to trailblazers and innovators, we have two courageous women who are in the process really of facing down a new moment in the history of this country. And we, as an organization, we are apolitical. We always stand up for women. You are showing up for women. You heard the rallying cry, you're here. General Burkhead is a woman who had stepped in after the Vice Admiral Yvette Davids was informed that she could not be on our program as a result of what's going on. And we'll just say that we're delighted that Janine Burkhead is here in civilian clothes, and you won't see her title on her name tag, and she is a civilian soldier, as you hear with the National Guard. But this takes real courage to show up right now and to be here. And so as a retired Major General, General Singh has a little bit easier time, but her contracts could be called into question. There are all sorts of issues that our community and our grantees and our future grantees and St. John's College, I know, is also facing. So I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for your courage. You're here. Thank you for your courage, ma'am, and so many in the room. This is impacting all of us in a new way, and it is so new. We'll talk about it a little bit more because we've got some interesting questions about it that are quite relevant also to both women who have seen it before, but maybe not quite like this, and young women who have never seen something like this. Very interesting point. Back to being trailblazers, you're innovators, you're creative people. In addition to your courage, you inspire others. I bet you may not, you're thought leaders. You may not describe yourselves that way because of who you are as leaders. But could you take a moment and think and share with us in your living room, what innovation, what thought leadership do you feel you might have brought to the equation? You may have indicated a little bit of that along the way, but is there something that you can think of, whether it's here now or as you were growing generals or whatever you'd like to refer to that you could share with us that really qualifies as some innovation that you've adopted in your life or shared with others?
I mean, so first off, working at a center, I did systems implementation. And when you think about that, you may think, oh, well, that's not innovation. But when you're working with a government client and trying to help them see what's in the art of the possible and helping them to think about ways to streamline efficiencies and to really think about things differently as we're going into new systems, that's what I spent my whole career on. So I'm always trying to think out of the box.
Yeah.
And looking at where can technology take us. Right now I am focusing on, and I'll kind of say this out here for the danger of leaking things, but I'm focused on looking at technology that is going to help us tap into our emotional intelligence in a way that helps you to become better decision makers and better leaders. I feel like that's something that we don't teach our people. We talk about it often. We try to do assessments and pretend that the assessment is going to give you all the answers, but we don't tell you how to ever implement it in the real world. And so what we are trying to really do, we go and we actually teach emotional intelligence from a very different perspective. We bring it into the real world scenarios to say, now how do you implement this? How do you bring compassion every single day? How do you bring empathy? How do you look at things and to do your self-assessment right at the time that you're making these critical decisions? And I can tell you we need a lot more emotional intelligence today. But when I think about where our young people are, they're striving for answers. They want to know. And we're not teaching them the most critical piece. And that's how do they do that self-assessment, look at where they want to be able to go, and then make that plan, and then really bring all of that into every piece, every role, every decision. And so when I think about technology, that's where we're going to be really leveraging technology to do that. And we want to do it at all levels, but we're looking at how do we do this now into that K through 12, right? The pre-K through 12 space. How do we do it with law enforcement? How do we do it with military? And then how do we roll that out to the rest of society? And so the challenge is going to be is whether or not we're going to be able to get the grants if we don't get cut off, and that could be a very well fact, but we're not giving up. And that's another thing I would say is just like this organization was started, and when we think about so many women that have started the path of one little idea and it's just moved, we can't give up. We have to continue to push and go.
Beautiful. Yay. President Demleitner.
So I'd say, I think as an academic, I was always trying to bring different areas of law together that people hadn't thought about, or things that had just fallen by the wayside and were considered to be old ideas, and bring them back in the forefront. And so I was spearheading kind of thinking in two different areas. And so I've tried to bring that kind of thinking to my administrative roles as well. And coming to St. John's, it struck me that there were two things that the college really needed to focus on. And one I feel we've made incredible progress on as I'm looking out on this group today. I think especially after COVID, the college had kind of become a little bit inward looking and a little bit too focused on itself. And no college in today's world can actually survive that way. You all know about the value challenge to higher education, the question about why are we paying so much, which I'm happy to discuss with you afterwards at the reception. And what is the value of higher education? Do we need higher education? And to me, there are many different answers to that. But one is certainly that colleges aren't just about the students and the faculty. They are also community centers. There are places where we have discourse and conversations, where we do theater and where we do music. And we need to talk about that as institutions, because that is a value that we bring to a community that often isn't realized until it no longer exists. And so one of my goals coming to St. John's really was to do this outreach, to build relationships with other not-for-profit leaders, to create more opportunities for our students, but also to prove to the city, to the county, to the state of Maryland, that this institution that's the third oldest in the country really has a special value that it continues to provide, and maybe a new value that it brings, whether it is a museum, whether it is a conversation like this. And the other piece, I think, to this is that I truly believe in kind of student success, in positioning students to be successful. Now, that's obviously true for our female students. It's also true for our male students, to create opportunities for them. And the community outreach is actually a big part of that. Because as you're building relationships with a community starts offering relationships for your students. And I know there are a number of you in the audience who've made incredible things possible for our students, whether they are tickets to the opera and music performances, whether they're internships and volunteer opportunities, mentorships for them. Because ultimately, it's about outcomes. The value of higher education will be measured in outcomes. Now, my argument would be outcomes in the workplace, but also outcomes as community players. We need to model what it means to be a responsible civic person, a contributor to your community and to your country. And that's really what I've been trying to bring together at St. John's. And I'm hoping and I'm thinking I succeed slowly. As we know, higher education changes slowly, but we are making a huge difference. And I think you're so right about this, Margaret. I would never say we're making a huge difference, but since I'm sitting up here, I have to believe that this is what we're doing on an everyday basis, and that we really kind of bring out the community. I think you're my proof here, and that at the same time, we're helping our students succeed.
Oh, well, well said. That's right. I'm really struck by, and I'm sure you heard it, I'm really struck by listening to President Demleitner talk about connecting humans together for impact, to reach out, for civic engagement, for the learning environment. And I'm also struck by, at the same time, we have a leader working on emotional intelligence. You put these two things together, and they're world changing, right? They're society changing. And I'd be so bold, having had a lot of my education be women's education and worked a lot with women my whole career. There are other women who would say, women think like this. They're multidisciplinary. They connect dots differently. And that's okay. We need all genders thinking differently and coming to the table. Everyone's welcome. But this is just so powerful to hear what we just heard the two of you talk about in terms of thought leadership and innovation. So thank you for sharing that. And it gives me hope in the world. I hope it does also our other living room guests, because yeah, let's go do this. Let's help you. And thank you for your hospitality as part of your outreach effort. I think that's great. Good leaders fail. We all fail. Failure is part of life. If you would be so kind as to share what you think the secret is to failing well. What do we do with those cards when we fail? Because we're all going to fail. And I had a young person once say to me, Miss Margaret, I failed, but it's what I do now that really counts. So I'd love to hear, I think we all would, and if you feel comfortable sharing a failure that you may have experienced in your life, we'd love to hear it and hear your thoughts about failing well. So let's see, I think we started with the general, so we'll start with the president.
Sure. I think
Thank you.
the first thing that I have learned from teaching for a few decades is to talk about failing. Because students are always amazed. I think they look at women leaders and they say, what? You once applied for something and didn't get it? That's not possible. You must be making this up. And it's like, well, I don't know about you, but I can tell you I've applied for fellowships, I've applied for positions, and didn't get them. I think the important thing generally is you can't look back all the time and think about the things that didn't work out, because sometimes it turns out they were meant not to work out. And that, I think, is really important to just keep perspective. What is really important in life as you're failing? What do you really care deeply about? And I think the other piece to me is to be able to look in the mirror. You want to always be sure that whatever you did, you're not losing self-respect. You can be proud of it, even if it's considered to be a failure, even if it didn't work. And there's certainly, as I've said, having been in higher education, there are many things that I would have loved to have seen happen, and that just haven't happened because change is really slow. There are programs I wanted to see happen, and they just never came to fruition. And that can be really disappointing, and it feels like a real personal, not just failure, but failing. That you can't get things done. But sometimes you have to have other people remind you what has gotten done. I think one of the things that I recommend, even though I don't do it myself and I sometimes wish I should, take stock. I mean, literally every 6 months, sit down and write down not all the things that haven't worked. We're all really good at this. But the things that actually have worked, the things that have gotten done, the things that have changed, whose life is better now than it was 6 months ago because of things that you've thought of, that you've kind of instigated, that you've been behind, that you've been supporting. I think those are really important moments, not to be caught up in failing, and really to remember that everybody fails, and it is not the end of the world. There are things that I would personally consider are close to the end of the world. Having a seriously sick, close family member, that's devastating. Failing professionally, as long as nobody gets killed, and in my line of work, fortunately, that's not likely. We're all good. I know this is different for you, so I understand the stakes are very different here. But that's kind of my thinking about really failing and talking about it and processing it yourself and then moving on.
That's wonderful. Thank you. General?
Well, I'm going to go back a ways because there's one that sticks in my mind that, I mean, it was very emotional for me at the time. And I was up for senior manager at Accenture. And actually, I think I was up for manager, so way before I even made manager. And, you know, I had my hopes up and had taken a different assignment because they were just like, you know, if you go into this different role and you start learning this new technology, you're going to be leading a development team. My team was out of Minneapolis. It was kind of a pain, right? Because they'd fly in and they had a short week and I lived here, so my weeks were longer. It's just kind of a pain, but anyway. And so when promotion time came, you know, the boss called me in and said that myself and the other female on the team, we were both team leads, we were not getting promoted. And I wanted to know why. Because it was clear that they valued what the Solution Center team was bringing to the table versus us managing, and we were both parents at the time, so therefore, you know, we couldn't go to happy hour, we couldn't do this, we had to pick up the kids, right? So I wanted to know why, and you know, when he called me in, he actually basically said that, number one, he felt like that my writing, I was illiterate. Yeah. That he felt like I wasn't spending the time. The problem is he was getting information from somebody else that was never ever in the office whenever we were in the office. We came early, but we left earlier because we were in, like I was in like at 6:30 in the morning. And so, but what I didn't realize was happening, and like, you know, he brought up all these papers and look at these emails and look at this. I was actually going through hyperthyroidism. So I was just diagnosed, and I hadn't been diagnosed at that point, but I was just being diagnosed with Graves' disease.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea how it was affecting me. It was affecting my speech. It was affecting my thinking. It was affecting my vision.
Wow.
You know, I'd have to, you know, be late to work, or I'd have to pull over when I would have tremors. And so it literally was affecting every part of my mental ability. So therefore, I was not able to comprehend certain things at times. It wasn't all the time. And so for me to then have to say to him, well, I've got some medical stuff that's going on. He's like, oh, well, that's just an excuse.
Oh.
So I didn't, you know, they made me actually go through writing classes, which I was just like, really?
Humiliating.
But you know what I did? I said, you know what, fine. If you want me to do this, I'm going to do this because I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let you get the best of me. And I'm like one of your better leaders.
Right.
And so I continue to kind of move forward in that. And I look at that as, you know, I should have said something to them sooner, but I didn't even know the signs. I had no idea how this disease was affecting me. And so when I at the time that I brought it out, and, you know, HR starts talking to me, and they're just like, oh my God, you really have some issues here. You know, we really had to kind of go around and about. And so finally, I got moved to another project. This partner, I've known, he became a huge supporter, so I will tell you, we got over it. But I did not give up. And I felt like I was not going to let that stand in the way of things that I love to do. But I, more importantly, was not going to let someone tell me that I wasn't going to be promoted. And I went on to make, you know, senior partner level at Accenture. But I will tell you that that was a point in time. That was a very low point for me, because there were so many things going on, and I could have just easily have said, you know what, I'm just done. I'm just going to throw in the towel. But you know, by God's strength, and my husband was so supportive. But it was very much of a challenge. And so my recommendation to all of us is, first off, you know, don't stand too close to the door that you wish would open, and you don't see the other 10 doors that could be opened. Secondly, you got to take care of yourself. If you're not taking care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally, it can really take a toll on you. And I know how serious it was for me. I mean, you know, it was almost to the point where, you know, I was going to go on beta blockers. And so it can really take a toll on your mental state. And so take care of yourself as we're, you know, kind of going through these challenging times. You have to take care of yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. It takes a lot of courage, and we're all supporting you. And look where you are now, so don't give up. I'm writing all these words of advice. I realize. Are you guys writing it down? I don't want to lose this. This is fun to be up here, but why? This is really important stuff we need to look at. I've got some questions. We'll be taking some questions from the audience, as well as I don't think we have a live stream way to get questions, but you could. Those of you who know my text number who are in our living room at home, you can just text me. I'll look down. And Karen Smith is helping us with the questions. We have index cards for you. Hopefully you have a pen that you can write that down, or borrow one from your neighbor. And what should they do? Karen, raise their hand for a card. And then Karen and her team will be collecting the cards, and we'll be distilling those questions and asking them towards the end of our conversation. Okay, so again, you're part of the living room conversation, don't forget. This is an understatement. We have some new cultural influences in our society, be they from COVID or new executive orders. what are you seeing as the impact on women, both the perceptions outside on women, of women, as well as the perceptions women have now of themselves or might be developing as a result of some of these, just mentioned a couple, there are many others, cultural influences, social media, but just what's happening even now. What do you see, and what's your advice about it? And I think we started with President Demleitner, so we'll pick up with the general.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
It is a hard one. I got them. No, I'm kidding.
So, so I think, some of you may not realize it, or maybe you all realize it, that, we're starting to see women slip backwards, right? Where we are being seen as less, and that's not true. I think that what we're not seeing is that we're being seen as a threat. So therefore, the way that you neutralize a threat is that you do everything you can to put the individual down, that you kind of put them in their place so that hopefully they have less power. And we've kind of been here before, and some of you may not have seen it in your time, but when I came into the military, there were a few women, not a lot of women in leadership, and even all of my career, not just the military, but even on the consulting side, I've worked in a very male-dominated environment, and I've seen things where they look at us and they go, "Well, you're not competent because you're a mom." I was like, it makes me more confident,
That's
right? Because
yeah,
I got to
so
be
true.
mom, I got to be wife, I got to be mom to my husband, right? Like, I have to tell him, okay, your laundry's done. Here's your laundry, right?
Mom to your team.
So we really need to be thinking about, one, pulling together. And we can't be looking in the mirror and say, well, am I worthy? And you can't let that narrative drive you away from wanting to do what you're passionate about. And we're going to have to, I hate to say, ride the wave. Right now, we're just paddling, and we're trying to keep the sharks away. At some point, that wave is going to come in, and we all need to be prepared to stand up on that board and ride the wave in. Mm-hmm. And so, and I say that, and I know it's easier said than done. I mean, I get up in the morning sometimes, and I'm just like, oh my God, like what's going to hit today? And I feel like we have to stay true to ourselves, and we're going to have to fight. And I know tonight they're honoring Harriet Tubman. If you have not watched the story on Harriet Tubman, mm-hmm. right? And there's so many more leaders. You can go around and look at the markers for women leaders that fought to give us the voting rights here in the state of Maryland. I mean, just look at some of what they went through. But I think about Harriet Tubman, and I'm not sure that I could have done some of the things that she did. I'm just like, no shoes, no this. I mean, going and leading people. And so right now, all of us in the community need to be leading from where we are. Our voices need to be heard, and we have to do it in a way that's going to be impactful. And I say that, I want to make sure that that point is driven home. Mm-hmm. That is going to be impactful. We have to be working in between, and I said this to someone earlier tonight, is that we have to be that lava that is working in between the crevices, and when it is time to overflow, we overflow. That's the momentum, because lava, once it's started, you can't stop it. And what I think about women is we have a spirit that you can't stop.
So true.
So that's what we need to be doing, and we need to do it together.
Mm-hmm. And when women get together, what can't they do, right? I mean, it's an incredible force for good.
There's nothing that we can't do.
That's
we
right.
live through childbirth half the time.
That's right. That's right.
Menopause. Like,
President Demleitner, your thoughts on this? I have to tell you, I'm going to credit the question to the president of St. John's, because she reminded us we need to talk about this right now. Thank you.
I feel like I came to this country in part because I thought women had so many more opportunities than in Germany. Even today, the number of female academics with full professorships in law in Germany is less than 10%. Now,
Wow.
I remember distinctly when, this was already when I was an assistant professor, when a German law professor told me in full earnest that women just don't have the right brain to aspire to the highest ranks of legal academia. That really was male brain. Women are fine at the mid-level because they just work hard. And I have to admit, I kind of tend to forget these things, and then suddenly they come up, and it's like, why is it we were all tolerating this? I remember I was listening to this thinking, seriously? But I didn't think it was worth my while having a conversation about this. And I forgot, because it wasn't my life. My life was here. And I wouldn't have been the first law dean at 2 schools and the first president here if I hadn't gotten so much support from men and women.
Sure.
I took it for granted, really, until a few years ago, that reproductive rights are protected. Now, what I learned a few years ago from being in a writing class were a number of women who were substantially older, like in their 70s and their 80s, and they told harrowing stories of themselves and their friends getting pregnant when they didn't want to be, of abortions that were possible or not possible. And I have to admit, this was so far from my reality that I felt that they were talking about at times I couldn't imagine. So it feels jarring to be living in a times where I have to imagine that this is a reality now in many states. So this is really hard. I have a daughter, and so it feels even harder for me to talk about that. But at the same time, I do feel it is essential for women, our generation and younger, who are leaders, to stand up. Because we have a next generation, and I see that generation every day because they are our college students. They need to be able to see role models. I've never been particularly interested in the first label, except when I see young women come up and say, oh, I am so glad that there's finally a woman. I am so glad I finally have a role model. And so that's why it's essential for us to do what we're doing. I've seen 2 highly accomplished women presidents being taken apart alive in public.
That's right.
One I knew casually, and I had watched her kind of rise through academia. The other one I didn't know. But when women presidents got together after that, each one of us looked at the other one and said, basically, who will be next? Not that publicly, but more privately about things we may have said or may have done or didn't say or do. So it feels like a very precarious position. So on the one hand, I absolutely say, yes, be out there, but do it smartly and impactfully, because none of us are helped if women fall all the time because they're taken down by greater forces. I couldn't help but really worry, Margaret, when you kind of commended us on our courage. It should not take courage to be on this stage, and it should not take courage to be in this audience. And I'm really disheartened that it does at this moment in history. And I think that is really difficult.
It does take courage to be a woman leader, period, and more than you think or ever expect. And it's fascinating perspective hearing what you thought coming from Germany and then also what you're experiencing. And yet the irony is that when we think about it, England abolished slavery before the US. Germany was ahead in terms of women leadership. We have yet to have a woman president. A lot of European nations have. We're behind in many respects. And it doesn't need to be that way. And I think you've both given us tremendous advice on both how to stand up, to stand up smartly and impactfully, and bond together and do it together, because that's a force. So I think that's incredibly helpful. A little bit of a follow-up question about young women and what you're seeing, since you are leading them, have led them. are teaching them, mentor them. Are their aspirations changing? And if so, what do you think some of those influences are? Don't want to ask an obvious question, but careers are open. Different careers exist, of course, today too. So we're not really necessarily talking about aspirations to be in a certain field. I'll give you a quick example and then I'll let you answer the question. I was stunned to find out about, it was pre-COVID, so let's say about 4 or 5 years ago, most of the leadership of Princeton University, president through the deans, were women. And yet that was the lowest percentage of the female student body that wanted to go into leadership positions on the campus. And the women leaders called a conference of the women students and said, what's going on here? We need to learn what is going on. The women's students' aspirations had changed. Are you seeing changes? And if so, what are you seeing? And that's just an example, not the only type of aspiration.
I think they're seeing us work incredibly hard. And I think sometimes they see a little bit more of the suffering than we probably let on publicly or privately. And they say, I don't want nothing to do with that. Why should I be doing this? Why should I be going through this?
Right.
At the same time, they don't see any of that. I mean, I think there's also this, we've done an incredible job, I think, so far in college to keep them very protected and to really have them believe they can do anything they want. And I'm very proud that we have accomplished that collectively in higher education because they don't see barriers. They see female presidents, they see female deans, they see female academics who have the biggest research grants. They see incredible success, and they see it in most areas. And that really makes a difference. And so it gives them the opportunity to think broadly. So I don't think they're restricted in that way. At the same place, however, I do think they see how much hard work goes into those positions. And they're struggling also with this question of, I know we'll get probably to this conversation about having it all. What does that mean? Can you actually do that? How do you make that work? I've had, not in college, but in law school, I've had women talk to me about, let's talk about work-life balance. And I jokingly said, like, let's start about talking about the start of your career. But that's a generational difference. They wanted to talk about work-life balance. I kind of wanted to talk about put some work in the first 2 years to build your career. So I totally am aware of that I think there is a generational gap to some extent. I think they may have it right, and they may have it better than we do, but we'll see how it works out.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting you mentioned that's exactly what the Princeton president and deans discovered, that the women on campus didn't want the corner office. They watched how hard it was. They said, I want a different lifestyle. I don't want to kill myself or ruin my family life in order to get that. Are you seeing different aspirations? Anything to add to that, General?
Well, I think, so I am seeing a little bit of that in terms of they really do want to have this thing of work-life balance. And my conversation to them is, you know, there's no such thing as work-life balance. I'm sorry, there's not, right? There's prioritization. And so you have to choose where you're going to put your priorities at the time that it makes sense. And that could be, you may want to be a parent at this time, which means then your career may not be the highest priority. So you have to prioritize. Because at least never in my life has it ever been about, if I could balance it on a scale, that'd be great, but it just didn't work that way, right? And so really trying to help them to see how can they achieve that. And I think that's where the conversation really needs to go, is how do we help them to see how they can have it all in due time. You can't have it all at once, which some of them feel like, well, I want it now. Right? And so you have to help them to be able to kind of see what's in the art of the possible. And how do they start moving through that and do it in a way that they can live a healthy life. And I have a wide variety of young people on my team. Some of them are military spouses. Some of them are college students. So I have a couple of interns. And then, even, some of the younger generation that works for me. And I will tell you that, I spend a lot of time trying to prop them up, right? And helping them to be able to see past some of the challenges they may be experiencing. It could be that I'm having pep talks because, something is extremely hard. And I'm like, well, do you think it's not hard for us? Because we make it look easy, right? They don't see all of what we've gone through. They just go, oh, well, it was easy for you. Well, no, it wasn't. Like, it was just as hard. Are you kidding me? There's many days that I, curled up and on my pillow and cried because I was just like, oh my God, this is just too hard. And so you really have to have the honest conversation to help them to see that you can move through this challenge. So now let's just take it logically, and let's just think about how you want to, and what's your priority today may not be your priority tomorrow. And so I have, 2 daughters, and I'm going to tell you, yes, they look at me and they go, oh my God, Mom is a high achiever. My oldest daughter just got promoted to captain in the police force down in Prince George's County the other day.
Wow.
And I'm just like,
Congratulations.
thank God.
Wow.
Right? And my youngest daughter tries to be my boss every single day. Like she works for me. She's my chief of staff. She does UE, UX design work.
Wow.
And I swear she tells me what to do every single day. She's like, Mom, no, you're doing it wrong. I'm just like, okay, well, I'm glad I have you to tell me, right? Like, so I mean, you can inspire them. And I think that's important, is to have that conversation and to say, what's important to you? And now, how do you want to go about making that happen? And for the younger generation, they're going to rule.
They are.
Right? Like, whether we like it or not, they are going to rule, and I do think they have it right. I think they have their priorities set. Well, I want to have a life, but I also want to have a career.
Right.
So now, how do I do all of that? Well, let's help them figure out how to do all of that.
Let's help them figure it out and support them through it. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we don't need to have a separate question on work-life balance because they've just talked about it, so this is great. I want to add an interesting thought, and perhaps you've heard of, I should know his name. I haven't thought about this until, again, this moment. There's a Wharton professor who has jettisoned the concept of work-life balance. And he teaches, espouses, and documents, and has studied with data work-life integration.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful way to help our generations to bring it all together. Because it's never going to work on the scale, is it? And the frustration and the stress and the disappointment, and it's so tough on them. And I watch our daughter do it. You're watching your daughters do it. But this idea that life is a woven fabric, right, with the warp and the weft, and sometimes work goes this way and life goes this way, and sometimes they go this way, but it's all woven together because it's never really going to balance. So we want to live with it together. And on the other hand, now with the way we work, even before COVID, but definitely after COVID, we're never away from life/family or work. Now, we need to put some boundaries on that, right? But it's not going to be as easy as putting work over here in this compartment from 9 to 5 with a commute anymore, right? So it's interesting concepts. I encourage us to think about it also as work-life integration. Again, it gives me hope as opposed to being overwhelmed by the subject of balance is never achievable, right? Yeah. I've got a question from the audience I want to get to. A couple of them have come in. But I thought we'd have a little bit of fun with a lightning round. You know how those go? So fun questions, quick, short answers, no stories, though, maybe over reception, and you're all invited to the post-event reception out in the beautiful foyer. You can find out what's behind all these. So just a couple things. What food is your guilty pleasure? Quick, first thing that comes to mind, lightning round.
Ice cream.
There you go, that's mine. How about your General?
Ruffles, cheddar cheese, potato chips.
Yeah, excellent, okay. I wanted to throw these out to you so you'd see that incredibly high-achieving female trailblazers are human. What's a cornerstone in your stay healthy plan?
Exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now do I dare go and say how many times a week? Because are they able to fit it in? We all know how hard that is. So exercise, take notes. What's a book that inspires you?
Always the last one I read. So it was Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which is incredible. And unfortunately, I don't recommend it for this day and age. It feels too close to home.
So it can be a little scary, isn't it, perhaps? Yes. A little bit Margaret Atwood-like, too. Yeah, Parable of the Sower is what she said. Do you have a book that you
I mean,
inspires
there's
you?
so many. I would say Colin Powell's autobiography.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's a really great one. How did you know that you had leadership instincts, and was there somebody in your life who helped you realize that? Still a little bit of a lightning round, sorry. But we know there's a story.
Yeah, I had a first sergeant that told me I couldn't stay enlisted because I like to boss people around. He says, you need to be an officer. Yes.
Sounds like my camp counselor. President Demleitner.
Actually, it was a group of senior faculty at Hofstra, all men, and all kind of pushing me on to kind of do what I should be doing, they thought.
Wow, that's great. I think it's really interesting that we have two women, maybe not so interesting given where our society has been, right? Two women who have risen through heavily male-dominated fields, who've been encouraged to be leaders by men and supported, because that's, in my book, that's the best that there could be, too. I think that's really fabulous. A little later this week, I won't make this a long story, my dad was a surgeon, and there are certain fields that just have so few women in them, and surgery is one of them, and the specialty is even further that way. So I always go over to the woman at this dinner that's held for a lectureship. There's always one or two still, and say, okay, I want to know everything about how she's doing it, why she went into it. She says it's finally, she says, getting a little better. Sounds horrible still. I mean, it is really an incredibly, she's not getting the kind of support, I think, that you've gotten along the way. And that can be true as well. So at any rate, I really commend you, and I find it really interesting. Okay, a question from the audience. What has been your biggest career challenge? Hard to be a lightning rod around on that one, right?
I think my biggest career challenge is when I went on my first deployment, and I found out that I was going to have to be gone from home 16 months.
It's a long time.
And my youngest was in middle school. My oldest was just graduating high school, going into college.
Wow. You're
and
gonna
then
miss
into
everything.
the police department. So, and I was sitting here going, how's my husband going to do this? Right? That to me was hard.
Very much so.
That was hard.
There are many moments I can think of, but actually I think coming to St. John's may have been the one. And here is why. It's a very distinctive institution.
Very.
So really learning to understand it, and then helping move it to where it should be going without doing any damage to what is really incredible about it, but making it shine in places where it isn't currently. So that's a work in progress, so we'll need a few years, decades to judge that, but I think that's a really fascinating challenge.
It's a fascinating challenge, and being a change agent is really hard. And I think you mentioned something important, which is understand the original culture, because the culture is so ingrained in an organization, understanding how it was founded, why, what's going on now, and then knowing where you want to take it, but then how do you get everybody together to move together to do that? There's a past president of this organization who's still very involved and influential, and she literally puts her wingspan out and says, let's all go move together now.
I love that.
I love that too. I think it's a great image, yeah. Another question from the audience. Who in your life was the biggest influencer in your believing in yourself? And do you have a story about that?
I would say, well, my husband.
That's so nice.
Right? Because, you know, we've been married almost 34 years. This year will make 34 years. And he was there through the first time that when I was going through OCS, Officer Candidate School. And so he believes in everything that I do. Still to this day, even when I'm just like, oh my God, this is so hard. And he goes, you've got this. Right? So he's still my biggest cheerleader.
That's wonderful. Fabulous. How about you?
I could echo that, but I feel like I should mention some other people, and I have a great story about that
Great.
that tells you a lot about women in Germany. And it's my parents. And so I did not learn this story. My mother did not tell me this until after I had graduated from Yale Law School. But it happened when I was in 4th grade. So in Germany at that point, you have to decide whether you would go to this has changed a little bit, it become more flexible, but at the time it was a very inflexible system. You would either go to the type of school that would lead you ultimately to university, or you would go to the type of school that would lead you to an apprenticeship. And I knew that I had, in my little elementary school, I had the highest qualifying grades to go to the kind of school that would lead you to university. But what I didn't know, that was the teacher had recommended to my parents to not send me to that school, but send me to the other school. And here was her logic. She'll become a secretary anyways, and she'll be married, so she doesn't need to go to university.
Wow, wow.
Fortunately, my parents just looked at each other and go, no, we'll do what we think is right. So I would never, ever have been here without them kind of having had that determination.
Wow, that's fabulous. Well done. We've got time for at least 2 more questions. So if there are any other audience questions, we're sure you get those cards handed in, and we'll do the best we can with the time we have. I want to jump to one that actually I'm gonna go with the boy route, the male route. Not everyone is raising women. We happen to have a few daughters up here. I have 2. You have 2. You have 2? There we go. What does that say about us? Not sure there are a lot of good women in the world, right? There's a block I have on my desk. Strong women. Know them, raise them, be them. I love that. I give it to our girls all the time. At any rate, there are boys, right? And there are men in the audience. I want to just take a moment and I want to use this phraseology. I like it a lot. We talk a lot about inspiring and supporting our young women. Obviously, that's so important. What do you see in our young men today? Do you think they understand and accept that that genie of strong women out there achieving is not going back in the bottle?
I mean, I would say yes. I think they expect that it's not going back in the bottle. But I'm concerned about our young men. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm concerned that with the focus that we've had, we're leaving them behind. And that's a real concern. We have less of them going into college.
Right.
We have less of them going into the military. And so we have to bring them along just as well as we're bringing along the young women. And I think that they know, and I think that the challenge is to be a young man where, and I'm just trying to put myself in their situation where they could be seeing, women, and they go, what about me? Right? And so we have to get a handle on this because we can't have the division, we can't leave them behind, but we can't go backwards. And so we're going to have to pull them with us, and we're going to have to really think about how we kind of move forward together and how we move this younger generation. And I will tell you, the younger generation, they don't see this big, I think it's more of the older generation, the middle and the older generation that sees it. The younger generation is like, what's wrong with you people? We can all work and, they just dynamically, they're very different. And so, but we can't leave them behind.
No.
And that, I would say that that's probably my fear. And yes, I don't have sons, but I have nephews. And I'm really hard on these boys, right? Because I want them to succeed just as well. And so I put just as much time and effort into mentoring, our young men as I do our young women. I think that that's important, and we have to recognize that there is a challenge right now. And it could be almost an epidemic if we don't watch it.
And biologically, the male brain develops at a different rate than the female as well. What do you see both in academia and
So I
society?
actually have a son, and then I have a daughter. She's 3 years younger than he is. They couldn't be more different as individuals. I'm sure gender plays a role, What I really like about, I think a lot of young men have now seen a whole generation of women in leadership. So they don't, it's not an issue anymore. Nobody kind of, that I've seen among young men says, oh, I couldn't work for a woman, which when I was in college, there were some of my classmates who were like, don't you have trouble working for a woman? Or do you have trouble with your wife making more money than you do? I never understood any of those questions, I have to admit, but they were clearly struggling. I don't think you would get that in a college classroom today because it's become just much more part of the community. On the other hand, you're absolutely right. Nobody celebrates generally the first men doing anything. It's about first women events. I often get the question, and fortunately you're not asking it, like, how many women are you mentoring? Are you mentoring women? Because I think we are, but my sense is we both are also trying to mentor young men. And I've often seen them actually more reluctant to ask for support, ask for mentorship. For me, like often ask for a letter of recommendation, kind of the things that would be very natural to do. So I think it is really important to think about both of them, not as different, but they both need support, different type of support. They'll clearly ask different questions. I mean, they don't ask generally about work-life balance or things like that. But I also think they've seen a lot more in their families now about how you're kind of changing priorities, how you're working with a partner or a spouse. So I think it's a different experience, and not all of them, of course, grow up in male-female households either. So I think that kind of opens up very different conversations. So I agree that we really have to be sure we're bringing the whole young generation along, but they come, fortunately, I think, with different experiences than our generation has.
That's very helpful. Interestingly, we've gotten 2 questions that relate to one of my final questions I was going to ask as well. So I think there's, I'll take it, 3 is a trend. There's a craving to get active. There's a craving to have some activism in this. So tying into the surfboard and surfing the wave analogy, I think, and where we need to go, I also want to get a little bit more specific. One question is, what can we truly do now? Yes, join, have impact smartly, show up, but what specifically? And then the other specific aspect of this question, many of us who worked in corporate America benefited from DEI efforts to intentionally help develop women and people of color. What's going to be the impact of less DEI, and what can we do about it now? So there's a craving for what do we do now? You all showed up. We issued, part of our invitation was come show up and demonstrate your support for women leaders. That's a great start. What do we do now? What do you think? It's a tough one.
As I think about your call of being like impactful and thoughtful in terms of what we're doing, I think there's a whole host of different things, and it depends on where everybody is situated. One, I think if you're thinking about personal philanthropy, support the organizations that really make a difference. And I was just recently talking to a fundraiser for a major national organization, and he said, if you do smaller gifts, give them locally. Make sure you're giving them to local organizations. I don't need to kind of point this out, but you really can make much more of an impact because a few kind of relatively small contributions go a very long way, which is not necessarily kind of, you're not making the same impact on a national organization that gets much larger gifts. So I think that is something really to think about. I think the role modeling piece is huge for everyone, wherever you are in an organization. And I think sometimes for women also to check our own thinking, and for men as well. Kind of, I think there's still a lot of stereotyping about women. There's still a lot of expectations about women, how they should show up or not show up. So I think it's going to be really important in the next few years to probably have less quick judgment about a lot of these things. I hear a lot about, I mean, especially college presidents, well, why aren't we out there? Why don't we say more? Why don't we put things in writing? Well, think about it. There may be some reasons
You have to be careful.
for that.
Absolutely.
So I think this is kind of the type of judgment, especially I think women, I think especially presidents of color, know they're much more exposed because we have seen it. So that's, I think, another, if you're in a position to make statements like that, take advantage of that. If you kind of held a position like that, but you don't currently, you really can't negatively impact the organization, but it would be really important to hear from you. I think all of that really matters. And then I think my final call is not to fall into the social media abyss, really checking facts. And I realize that takes forever these days to check who says what, where, how, and where is it really accurate and how is it portrayed and what are you thinking about that? But I think the discourse will just get worse, and I think the misinformation will get worse, and it's really important to guard against that.
Amen. That's great. Thoughts on what can we do now?
Yeah, so, you know, I think you've already mentioned just the number of nonprofits. Go out and look at some of the nonprofits that focus in on areas where you have a passion, right? And engage them. And whether you are, you know, volunteering for them or, you know, looking at, you know, what are they supporting, especially the number of nonprofits that are pushing legislation, that are out there fighting the fight every single day, because there are tons of them. If you are not engaged in your local community with your local level leaders, and we have some local leaders here, you need to engage with your local leaders. Find out, you know, what's important to them. How can you help them fight the fight for us, because that's what they're there for, right? And when I say, you know, your state leadership, looking at your congressional leadership, engage with them. Go to the town halls, and don't be afraid to ask a question, have a conversation. I mean, I think it's going to take us continually being very engaged and active in our communities, and that's where it really starts. Like, you know, all changes start locally. If we think that, you know, big federal government is going to solve everything for us, we're wrong. Everything starts locally. So let's start pushing locally. Let's start having those conversations. And then, you know, I'm always looking at, you know, where can I go to be engaged with other individuals, like-minded folks, where, you know, we are going to be focusing in on how do we now move the conversation forward. And, you know, I would say in terms of the DEI, okay, you know, when DEI came in, we were already doing things before. And then somebody came up and coined the term DEI.
That's right.
Right? So let's now, and you know, what I say to folks is, we need to be focusing on harnessing emotional capital. Harnessing emotional capital is about everybody. It is about making sure that I am meeting you, whoever you are, wherever you are, at that place, and helping to drive that talent forward. We all need to be focusing on harnessing that emotional capital and bringing it up and using it for good. And I think if we start focusing from that perspective, then we won't fall backwards.
That's right.
Right? We're going to make sure that we're bringing everybody along, and we're doing it in a way that's equal. Right? It has this level of equality. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to get the same thing, because not everybody performs the same way, I'm just going to say. Right? So it's not all about that. This is about everybody having that opportunity. And so, you know, I want to be able to harness that knowledge capital, that, you know, what they bring to the table, and look at it as in, okay, yeah, it might be somebody that's 20-some years old working on my team, but I'm listening to them and I'm just like, oh my God. That, like, I have an intern working for me. He graduates in May. And the challenge that I've given him is to really get into this technology. And the stuff that he brings back to me, I'm just like, holy cow, right? And so it's about harnessing that emotional capital, right? And I let him know, I'm just like, God, I would have never thought of that. And it's just great to be able to see that. So that's what we need to be bringing to the forefront. And then we need to have a love for people. Like, I don't care if you're purple, green, brown, whatever color, you're a zebra, you're, you know, horse, right? Love everyone. And do it in a way that allows them to be whole at the end of the day.
Yeah. Amen. So true. I think we've got some homework to do. We've got our marching orders. Let's thank these fabulous women trailblazers for their time, for your journey, and for sharing it with us. Thank you so much. Got a standing ovation. We also want to thank you for being with us. I want to invite a very special member of the Giving Circle to make some closing remarks, Ms. Nanetta Hall, a fabulous visionary and extremely happy person who shares her love with everybody, is going to greet us. I want to invite you to stay with us and continue the conversation at a reception provided by our sponsors. And Nanette will tell you a little bit about that. That's Bread and Butter Kitchen has laid out beautiful food for us in the foyer. Please stay if you can, get a little bit of sustenance. Thank you so much for your attention. Nanetta?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see all the beautiful smiling faces. Did you guys have a good time? Can you give our panel a round of applause? Well, I'm Nanetta Hall, and I'm a member of Arundel Women Giving Together for a little less than a year now, and I'm a new member of the Education Committee. I would like to say thank you to everyone for joining us for this evening's program. I know we heard some pretty powerful words here this evening. I took notes. Courage, passion, commitment, innovators, trailblazers, empowerment. I work with Historic Annapolis, and I oversee a program called Footprints, and we teach Title I schools here in Annapolis about colonial Annapolis, the type of people that make up the city. At the end of the 6 weeks, we pose a question to the students. What footprints will you leave? So I challenge you all today, with all that's been said here, what impact will you have? What impact will you have? The generation is not the next generation, it's the now generation, because they're watching us. What examples will you be? So that's important, what impact? We've heard that a lot this evening. I would like to offer sincere thanks to our panelists, Ms. Nora Demleitner, President Nora Demleitner, and Major General retired Linda Singh. Thank you for your service to all the women who served in the military. I myself am a retired Air Force member, and thank the family members, that's important as well. And our facilitator, Margaret Davis, for your valuable time and for leading such an insightful, inspiring, and thought-provoking conversation. I also want to express gratitude to the following: our Platinum Underwriter, Brian and Patricia Geis Foundation, leadership sponsors, Arundel Dermatology, Sims and Campbell Estate and Trust, Murthy Facial Plastic Surgery, our advocate sponsors, Merrill Lynch, Murray, McGarren, and Shirey, Sarah Greenlee Morse, Sotheby's, Chesapeake Medical Imaging, Garjo Smile Dentistry, and our media sponsors, Baltimore Banner. In-kind donations, Daytalk Written Group, Annapolis Dragon Boat Club, Homestead Gardens. And I wanted to leave with a little something here. Let me put on my readers here. I want to leave you guys with this. It's a little phrase from, I'm sure most of you know Shirley Chisholm. She was the first African-American woman elected to Congress. Well, she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And the idea for that is to not settle for being left out, but to take the initiative and create your own opportunities and platforms. This concludes our program. I hope you guys are now organized, energized, and optimized.